Perps are one of the most profitable businesses in crypto, generating billions of dollars a year in returns. And the war for the Perp DEX sector is heating up in recent weeks. In this video, I'm going to break down the top projects in the sector based on their fundamental metrics. I'll look at Aster, Hyperliquid, and others to understand their volume, their revenue, their open interest, and more. The goal is to determine which projects are overvalued, which are undervalued, and which are best positioned for the future. Now let's get into it. To start, I want to give some context on how we got here and why the competition has been so fierce in this sector. If you've been following DeFi, crypto, or this channel for the past year, then you know that Hyperliquid has been one of the hottest, best performing new tokens. Hyperliquid is both a layer 1 and it's the leading Perp DEX. And let's just put some numbers to this real quick. So if we look purely at the metrics, Hyperliquid has grown since the start of 2024 from having $57 million in total value locked and about $2.3 billion in weekly perps volume to now having over $80 billion in weekly perps volume, with some weeks even higher. One week was over $100 billion, and having over $6 billion in total value locked. So you can do the math. That's basically massive multiples in just a few years. And the result of this, I think Hyperliquid is both a beneficiary of this trend, but also a driver of this trend, is that the proportion of total derivatives trades in crypto that is on DeFi, that is in decentralized exchanges versus centralized exchanges, has grown. And it's grown from around 4% in September 2024 to over 20% now. If we go back further, we go back to January 2024, it was under 3%. Even last crypto bull run, when a lot of people were using DeFi, there was a lot of excitement around DeFi. You can see it was only around like 1 to 2%. Some months it was even below 1%. So basically, decentralized exchanges were not major players in the realm of perps. And now they are, since Hyperliquid came along. And the result of this is that Hyperliquid is making a lot of money. So let's just add some context and numbers to this. Hyperliquid in a typical month recently. So July made $90 million. August made over $100 million. September made $82 million. And this revenue gets accrued back to Hype token holders in the form of buybacks. But basically, like Hype, a lot of money is going in. And that's one of the reasons why you know this isn't all wash trading either, because this money is going in, is being spent, and then it's being used to buy back Hype tokens, right? If it was just wash trading, then you wouldn't actually have that revenue that gets passed out outside the protocol at the end of the day. So to recap, you have Hyperliquid, incredible product, rapid growth, probably one of the fastest growing startups of all time by some metrics, especially if you look at the fact that they have something like 10 employees. I don't know how many now, but they've got very few employees, which by the way speaks to the scaling power of DeFi. But basically they're making a ton of money, and now you have all these other players that are seeing this and saying, hey, we want a piece of that too. And I think most importantly, you have some existing players in the perp space who are seeing their business model being threatened. And the one that I want to highlight is Binance, because Binance is the leading centralized exchange. And so Binance has seen Hyperliquid's growth in terms of market share. They've seen the growth in decentralized exchanges in terms of market share. And so what is Binance's solution to this? The solution is that they are throwing their weight behind this decentralized exchange, Aster. And you can see the volume here has just gone insane recently, growing from a few $100 million a day in August to $70+ billion a day in recent days. And things get confusing here because Aster technically is different than Binance. They have their own token. It's not BNB. But there are some very deep affiliations. If you go, for example, to the Twitter of Binance founder CZ, you can see he's constantly talking about Aster, talking about the benefits of it. He allegedly confirmed that ex-Binance employees are working on Aster, here, even all the way back in June, he talked about having Binance level liquidity on Aster. So this is whatever the specifics of Binance's affiliation with Aster are. It's the Perp DEX that Binance is throwing their weight behind at the moment. And given Binance's immense resources, you can see this reflected in their volume. Now, important thing to note, and we're going to talk about a complete breakdown within this sector in a minute, is that perp volume is probably not the best metric if you really want to get into the weeds, because perp volume, you don't necessarily know how much value is being captured by that volume. You don't know how sticky it is. There's other metrics like open interest that we'll look at as well. But just to briefly look at open interest, then you can see this has also grown significantly from being almost inconsequential to being closing in on $2 billion in open interest on Aster. And for some context of what that means with Hyperliquid, then we can see Hyperliquid's open interest is around $12 to $13 billion at the moment. And that's basically how we got to where we are today. Hyperliquid grew rapidly, taking up market share from Binance and other centralized incumbents. And so now you have all these other players coming in, some backed by the existing incumbents as they try to get back some of that market share. So how exactly can we assess who is winning, and what should we look for in the future to determine who is actually winning this battle? All right, so first thing that's important, and this goes for any on-chain metrics. By the way, I work for this platform, DeFi Llama, that we're going to use in this video that I've been using. But the first thing that you should look for always when you're looking at these metrics is you want to look at measures of both liquidity and activity. And then you want to look for dominance in those measures that is sustained over an extended period of time. And so what do I mean by liquidity versus activity? Let's take a look and I'll give you an example. So activity would be something like perp volume. This is actual activity on the platform. So this is people trading, in this case, trading derivatives. And each individual day basically measures what occurred on that day, the activity on that day. Revenue would be a measure of activity in most cases as well. Open interest would be an example of liquidity for perp DEXs. So this is going to be much steadier day to day, and it's going to be much more difficult for new incumbents to take over because here it's the notional value of all outstanding perp futures positions. So with Hyperliquid, for example, even though Aster has been doing more volume recently, Hyperliquid still has far more open interest. Hyperliquid's open interest is 12.8 billion versus Aster's 1.67 billion. Other fast-growing competitors like Lighter and EdgeX have increased their market share to over $1 billion in open interest, but again, it's still significantly less than Hyperliquid, whereas their volume is much closer. And so to that framework we talked about before, basically what we want to look for here is, are there any upstarts that are able to challenge the incumbent both in measures of liquidity and in activity? We have 1 out of 2 so far. We have volume, measure of activity. You can see here, if we look, for example, over the past 30 days, Lighter is doing nearly as much as Hyperliquid. Aster is doing significantly more. And by the way, part of the reason why Lighter and EdgeX are doing so much, I suspect, is people airdrop farming. Also, I believe there may be some airdrop farming going on Aster, even though they already have a token. But so that's basically like 1 out of 2 measures that would favor the incumbents and favor the upstarts, and also point to the incumbent Hyperliquid losing market share. If we look at an actual breakdown of perp volume market share, then you can see that over the past couple of weeks, Aster has actually had a majority on its own, whereas previously Hyperliquid had either a majority or a plurality of volume. If we look at last month, for example, we can see that Hyperliquid had 23% market share in volume over the course of the month versus Aster having over 40%. And those positions are completely flipped from the month before. In fact, Aster wasn't even in the top 4 in the previous month. In fact, I don't even think it was in the top 5 in the previous month. So Aster really came out of nowhere here. And So that gets to the second thing we would look for is this sustained? And so what I would be looking for here to determine whether Aster is actually able to compete against Hyperliquid in the long run is, what does this market share look like in, say, another month, another 2 months? Because Hyperliquid has been the largest Perp DEX for close to a year, if not over a year at this point, whereas Aster has only been the largest Perp DEX for a couple weeks. And you oftentimes, especially for these activity-based metrics, you will have new challengers that come get a lot of market share for a few weeks, and then it fades out. So basically, to determine if Aster is going to be able to become the dominant player, you'd want to look for two things in the metrics. You'd want to see their open interest climb. So their open interest has been growing, but you'd really want to see it get like much closer to Hyperliquid's. And then you would also want to see Aster's dominance of the perp space. You want to see it maintain some or most of that dominance over an extended period of time. Because otherwise, all we know here is that it spiked up, and it could spike down just as quickly. On the flip side, what would we need to see Hyperliquid do to be confident in it as an investment and as the leading Perp DEX in the future? Well, the first thing is, and I think Hyperliquid is somewhat unique in this respect, in that a lot of its value is derived from buybacks. We want to see its revenue maintain. We want to see its revenue hold steady as it has for several months, because then, even if it's losing market share, if it's still making as much money, then what really matters is the ratio of its market cap to the revenue that's being brought in. Hyperliquid is also unique in that it has an entire ecosystem attached to it. So I think eventually Hyperliquid, in fact, it's already becoming much more than just a Perp DEX. And so once that happens, the market cap of Hyperliquid may be less tied to its performance as a Perp DEX, but for the context of this conversation, assessing it as a Perp DEX, we would want to see the revenue hold up, and we would want to see the open interest hold up as well, right? We want to see the open interest maintain at like 10 to 15 billion, if not climbing is even better. If we see it start to lose open interest while other competitors grow, then that would mean that those competitors were taking Hyperliquid's users, taking their liquidity. If it stays and the other ones grow, then the new ones are expanding the category. But the big risk we want to watch out for is, are Aster, Lighter, EdgeX, others able to grow while taking actual liquidity away from Hyperliquid? So far, if you look at this, there's actually, except maybe over the past 2 weeks, there's not a ton of signs that it's that you've seen those outflows, which is good for Hyperliquid. In fact, the past 2 weeks, this looks to be like mainly normal fluctuations. But if we saw this dip down further, get like down to its lows from August or go below there, then that could be a red flag that something was going on. By the way, if you like this kind of crypto analysis where we look at fundamentals, I send out a newsletter a couple times a week at newsletter.dynamodefi.com. It includes recommended readings, metrics, and more, with an eye on basically using numbers to identify opportunities in the market. And if you want more videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.